Hey, a very good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much, Gitika, for this fabulous introduction as always. And a big shout out, three cheers for Event FAQS for having come up with yet another master blaster. Congregations India, in its first edition, ladies and gentlemen, I would want you to please welcome along with me my three friends and guests for today. Mr. Kaushik Mukherji. Mr. Kaushik Mukherji has been an integral part of the government's events business for about 5 years now. He works as a principal consultant to the government of Andhra Pradesh. Then I have Iram. Iram runs an enterprise called the Firstborn Collective, and she is consulting various state governments and curating various ideas for them for either development of tourism or promotion of certain other activities which are around conservation and skill development, etc., etc. And Khantil, everyone knows Khantil. Khantil is our Go Banana champion from Gujarat, and today I think most of us, if we want to know something about the Prime Minister's future program, all of us know where to look at. So that's Khantil for you. So welcome everybody. And we know that the time that we've been given is fairly short, 30 minutes, and four people. Mr. Mukherjee, we'll begin with you. And, something which I think practically every relevant person in the events business is aware of, the success story of Andhra Pradesh and what the government did between 2016 and 2019 with events. Uh, 5 zones were created and about 5 companies were roped in. So can you just tell us how did that whole thing begin and what was the rationale behind it?
First of all, Samit, a big thank you to you. In COVID time, this is a very welcome break, getting to talk to you and the other friends here. Quick answer to your straight question. A tourism department generally relies on advertising, typically has a strap line to promote its entire geography. And we said, no, we don't do those mistakes. So what we did instead was that we picked up the multiple different offerings of the state of Andhra Pradesh, be it the India's finest beaches of Vizag, be it religious tourism in Tirupati, you don't have a bigger temple than that in this country, be it the backwaters of Guindy, because when you say backwaters, people talk about only Kerala. And we were very clear that like an FMCG company, we will subdivide our offerings and create brands out of them. Step one. Step two, no advertising. Because honestly, advertising per se doesn't sell tourism as it used to once upon a time. So what we instead chose was we'll create events, and those events will be a reason for a prospective traveler to travel to those destinations or sub-branded destinations. So in other words, we didn't create events, we created experiences. And our whole purpose was if I have a beach, then the event should give you the experience that the beach can only offer, which is not the case. For example, what we did in a place like Vijayawada, which is the then capital city of the state, and then very simple in character.
Sorry, Mr. Mukherjee, I'm interjecting here. So is it safe to believe now that the governments have started to understand the difference between events and experiences? And would you say that the governments are now ready to embrace experiences over events?
I would like to believe so.
Okay, super. Something very interesting that your state did, and we learned about the fact a little later, was that you empaneled event companies for different zones.
Yeah.
While most of the times what we hear is that there's a tender and people apply, qualifying companies apply for a tender, and that particular job is awarded to the company that wins the bid. But you empaneled companies. So what is the difference? But why did you go for empanelment of agencies and not just go ahead with the tender process straightforward?
Instead of beating around the bush, let me tell you, I mean, if the relationship is stable and not a one-night stand, it's always stable that way and better off that way. So jokes aside, what I'm driving at is the point that when you have an empanelment with somebody with a clear agenda on the location that the company has to promote, there's a long-term view to it. What comes out as a creative product and as an execution of an event are both very stable and steady. And they can only improve rather than a one shot in the dark, which is what a one off event becomes, as a matter of fact, on an LOQ basis. We didn't want to go that way. We wanted guardians of these five destinations within the state that we wanted to promote. And each guardian was very given. Now you got to understand the place, so get into the DNA of it, build experiential events around the DNA of it, and then promote it. And when you promote it, you got to come back with a measurement tool to the government of Andhra Pradesh saying that this is what I did and this is what you got, whether in terms of inquiry, in terms of search, in terms of resultant room bookings, because ultimately you got to sell your hotel rooms.
So you said that the people were to come back to you with the measurement tool. So
Absolutely.
I will come back to you on that measurement piece a little later. Iram, my next question is actually coming to you. You've been very actively working with various governments in the Northeast, and linking to what Mr. Mukherji was just now talking about, empanelment of agencies rather than getting agencies on board one-off. What is your belief?
So, taking cues from what Mr. Mukherji talked about in terms of experiential marketing, we also are looking at this very fast emerging trend of people going towards exploratory and authentic form of experiences, as opposed to the entire mandate being destination specific. And now governments slowly are also sort of getting attuned to what the travelers are seeking. My experience with Northeast, when I started to look around and its unutilized potential, was very much in tune with the latest behavioral trends. It's a highly exploratory place. It has a huge amount of natural.
So is the government believing more in empanelment, or is the government believing more in one-off appointment of agencies for specific works? That was my first question.
Right.
Mr. Mukherjee, to you. If you can please answer that for me, that will be important for us. And then what you were talking about on that, what are the kind of opportunities that you think exist in the tourism sector for event management companies?
So I would actually take up your first question, where the nature of opportunities that kind of exist have drastically changed. In fact, it's quite a great time for event management companies, because now you're looking at plethora of experiences as opposed to one-off event. Now your target demographics have been divided into subgroups, where you're crafting experiences and personalizing them, everything from a bird watching to a caving. Like, for instance, when we curated a product called the Meghalayan Age for the state of Meghalaya, we realized that there are these specific revenue streams for the government and very, very authentic experiences for the travelers. Everything from a hot air ballooning to introducing glamping for more immersive natural experiences, to packaging a lot of what we have, the indigenous sort of cultural capital, and making it more palatable for the new age travelers. So from the opportunities perspective, when you look at this time, it's extremely prolific for event managers, because now you have as opposed to one destination, one singular experiential product, you can create multiple experiences. Coming back to your second question, empanelment versus one-off agency, there is an increased sort of a knowledge formation within the governments, that they're realizing that they have to adhere to an experience versus, as opposed to a single product paradigm, where they're scouting for multiple agencies to work on different kind of experiences, and which is what's resulting in consortiums, collaborations of all sorts. I think, which is what I think Andhra Pradesh example that Mr. Mukherjee was sort of talking about gave us an insight into how governments think, and that is the clear emerging trend that we are seeing in a lot of governments, and that's what I saw in while working with Northeast as well.
I'll come back to you, Iram. Khantil, I move to you on a word that Iram now used, which is consortiums. And a lot of government play these days is happening on the basis of good consortiums coming together. So what's your take on that? And how has been your experience dealing with different kinds of government events, specifically when you work in a consortium?
So I'll just use that word, and am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
please.
Yeah. So I'll use this particular term that most of the people might not know, the young event managers. the empanelment process. The empanelment actually is happening across the country. It is being used across different regions and states. But in the empanelment process, there are different criteria, and it's a process in which 10, 12, 15 event management companies are shortlisted, and then they are assigned the curation task, or then when an opportunity comes, it's thrown open to people, and then again the prize and the presentation and the entire process begins. So that is something which is already happening in the country, which is a good thing. But I think we need more, a much more refinement process in the empanelment process also, and that should be the criteria should be again relook at in the empanelment process. That is something which I strongly believe. Uh, Coming back to the consortium part, the collaboration part, I think what happens is everything, the entire government process is strictly protocol based, and when you work under a particular protocol, there are price points, there are certain company turnovers, there are certain legal structures which you have to follow. And a young budding company or even established companies doesn't necessarily are qualified to those parameters, which is where the consortiums takes place. Also, in terms of collaborating, where you have multiple expertise coming on to create an experience. That also is something which is already happening in the country, and that's some. I mean, it's a very good initiative. Taken by the event managers to come together and collaborate, not only during this post-COVID times, but even before COVID, collaborations have always taken place, and they have actually helped even the governments to offer and create platforms for much interesting experiences.
Kantil, my other question to you, and if you know the larger interest of our friends and colleagues, event management companies, a lot of people have, this instilled fear. They have phobia that has developed over a period of time that dealing with governments is very difficult. There's too much of paperwork, too much of red tapeism, a lot of bureaucracy to handle, and the process is complicated. What is your point of view on that?
सर, जो शादी करता है इवेंट मैनेजर, वेडिंग्स करता है, वो कॉर्पोरेट से भागता है। जो कॉर्पोरेट करता है वो वेडिंग से भागता है। उसी तरह से गवर्नमेंट के लिए भी एक फोबिया है जो अननेसेसरी है। I think the platform of the government and the potential at which you can actually grow with the government, with multiple different governments, with the city, like you have a city administration. So in a state there are multiple city administrations. Then you have the entire state central body of the state who is deploying certain resources, who's coming up with opportunities. I think if you start small somewhere and then grow into it, पेपर वर्क और टीडीएस प्रोसेस तो आने ही वाला है। शादी के अंदर भी 8 महीने लग जानी पड़ती है क्लाइंट के पीछे। इट्स अ वेरी टीडियस प्रोसेस। शादी also, corporate also is a very tedious process. Government, I don't think it's a tedious process. It's just the mindset, and I think that mindset needs to change drastically right now, because the 2021 and 2022 are going to be a massive breakthrough opportunity centers in the government area. So I think it's going to be a massive breakthrough for all the event managers if they concentrate well, and if they start collaborating and forming consortiums, and they look forward to those opportunities.
So, Khantil, thank you. I will come back to you. So I now want to kind of just explain to all our friends watching the logic behind the naming of this session, which is the king, queen, and the jack of the government. So the king will always be the government, because the government is the king. The government is creating all of these opportunities for various kinds of developments. The queen here is actually the curator. So, a lot of us just engage with tenders. A lot of us do get involved in the process of curating tenders as well. At large, there is a think tank sitting somewhere thinking about what this, then they are making presentations, they are making policy decisions with various people relevant to government officers here and there. So that's another set. So that's the queen, and the jack is people like you, Kantil, and me. So the people who actually get into the trade hands-on and implement. So there's this proper chain. There's a complete circuit which follows. Kaushik, coming back to you, Mr. Mukherji, and we were talking about ROIs, which is when we kind of left. So my question to you: have you been able to successfully measure ROIs on experiential events versus the kind of measurement matrices that you've successfully used in advertising over a period of time?
Samit, I'll keep it snappy because the more questions you ask, the better for all of us. Typically, advertising is measured on reach. Full stop. So what we did, we took it beyond the point that, okay, in my house, we get 2 newspapers a day. There'll be about 67 ads in that paper, which is on the right-hand side. Forget the left-hand ones anyways. What am I driving at? If I'm a tourism department, if I have to promote a certain destination, if the story is written in the newspaper from a PR perspective and it's a story, believability rises. 1. 2, reach measurable. No issues. Next one, if the story cannot create curiosity to drive people from offline to online, then we are lost. So our first measurement was if I had to advertise in a typical national branded newspaper in multiple cities, the same number of stories, if you took the same amount of space and put it for advertising, how much would you have paid? Vis-a-vis one event, publicized in story format by PR agency-led story being fed, travel journalists, travel trade, in the media, we get it at one fraction of the cost of advertising. First measurement. How much money have I saved? 2, pre-event, there would have been a certain traction online about inquiry about a certain place. Post-event, how much has it jumped? Very measurable in today's days and time. That's very easy. Second metrics. Third, pre-event, the hotels were selling rooms at a certain price at a certain frequency. Post-event, what is their gross inquiry? What is their gross occupancy? What is their gross revenue? Which is the fundamental impact on the GSDP or the state's GDP.
So amongst the various events that you curated in the last 4 or 5 years in Andhra Pradesh, were you successfully able to measure all of these things? Yes or a no?
Firm, yes.
And do you think this will continue because the current government stopped everything that the previous government had initiated?
I'm afraid yes. I'm sad.
So how do people like you and Iram, who are also playing the role of people who are creating policies, how are you fighting situations like this? So Iram, I come to you with this question now. So how does a think tank or a body of think tanks like you handle these situations?
Now, I think the way to look at this particular problem, which is a kind of an intactical problem, because you're looking at events as a one-off activities that is done for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I believe in strategic long-term strategy. When you're creating a blueprint for a particular state where you're creating a projection or a phase-wise plan to develop certain capitals, it takes about 5 years to kind of turn into marquee properties. I think the language around the events needs to change, and the mindset as to not treat them as a one-offs, but look at them turning into flagship, signature, marquee presentations of the states. And which means the plans need to be developed for 5 years, 6 years, and proper engagement to be done. That's the way I look at it, and that's actually the knowledge gap that needs to be filled.
So you used the word mindset here just now.
Right.
And mindset is obviously what we refer to as alignment in our day-to-day communication. So
Right.
your alignment as a consultant with the government that you're consulting with,
Right.
and government's alignment with an event manager in terms of what is it that they're actually wanting to do on ground.
Right.
So what kind of gap that exists here, and how would you recommend the event management companies to work and bridge that gap?
Right. For instance, very, very interesting question. And I think when I was talking about the fact that you need to look at the entire life cycle of a particular property. or an event. Now, this life cycle, when we look at the event, we look at it, the activity taking place, but we often sort of forget the production, which is also very much aligned with the skilling that you're doing. For instance, for any ground event that you're doing, for the pre-production of it, you're actually skilling an entire cohort of people down there. So there is a high level skilling that's happening there, whether it's like high end crew operations, whether it's adventure activities, whether there are premium services that are being offered. Secondly, we never ever talking about the evaluation or the measurement of it. We look at the measurement. The metrics that exist are very oriented towards the event. How long? Look at the long tail of it. If we did, let's say, a Pushkar, or we did a particular, Meghalian age for that matter, in a period of 3 years, what kind of local economy, what kind of livelihoods, what kind of high-end skilling it's going to generate? I think it's about time when we need to start speaking and look at the entire life cycle of a particular event or a property, and then would probably be able to sort of come at the more aligned point of view. And that's what needs to be communicated to the government as well. Also, on the hindsight, sorry. Yeah.
Got it. Sorry, for paucity of time, I'll kind of move on to Khantil.
Sure.
Khantil, what Iram was saying just now leads us to another interesting question. Is the life cycle of a relationship with any company on a particular product or an event? So you've been doing many government properties. So what's your experience been? Do they sign you up for a 3-year or a 5-year?
Well, there are opportunities which are there for 2 years, 3 years. In fact, the Kutch Festival is an example where it's almost like a PPP model, and there are many such properties like that. But I think that mindset for long-term relationships is still taking shape. It's not still arrived. Also, with the change of the government, like what we were just mentioning about the Andhra Pradesh government thing, where the government change has kind of given a deadlock to this entire earlier formation of the properties which were created, the event properties. So I think a mindset change where event is not just one-off, but it is something where it is for the state, and the types and the formations are done for a long period of time. It's a difficult journey until unless you have the same government coming at least for 10, 15 years, and till the time it becomes a public ownership thing where people demand it. I think till that time, it's going to be this challenge. The government, the 5-year shift is going to be a challenge, and but still, you should not lose hope. I think 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years also is a good time to mature an event and to take it to the next level. So the types are possible. There are very small types also which are there for city specific types also there. Not just large format events, but very interesting curation possibilities are there with the government, which I think we should explore more. And that is something which instead of doing one large thing, if you have if you do some engagement or ideation with the government, or you work with partnership with the government where you can engage the entire city, like for example the art walk. If like Ahmedabad, we have been proposing the art walk at various locations. So the heritage walk has started. Heritage walk is quite popular, and it is irrespective of the government, it is not going to change. Similarly, there are some properties which can happen for a long period of time if the people interest is high and people take it up. The ownership of people becomes where they get attached and they love the entire property. Probably then it's difficult for the government to change
We have
that
3
format.
minutes, so I will give
Even
it
the
to you.
government change.
What are the 5 skill sets that the government would predominantly be looking at when empaneling an event management company? So what are the top 5 skill sets that you would look at?
Samit, not 5, 1.
Okay.
Why? Because when we floated the tender, looking for even companies to curate and execute what we wanted, I was very clear that the tender will not be a tender asking for specifications of goods to be used, their cost and their rate, and the L1, L2, L3. Ours was the first tender in this country from a tourism office which actually had a creative brief. And you would remember, because I remember you participating in that tender, and the tender was not easy. It was like any typical advertising pitch tender. A. B, what we were looking for, and governments will look for as far as tourism events are concerned. Two things, Samit. A family or an individual goes for a holiday. Why? He seeks happiness. The only parameter I will look for is, does that execution company, is it an execution company, be all and end all, or does it have the creative hat to come and say, this is how I will create happiness, and that happiness will escalate over time. It'll become so big that that will be the reason for people to come to the destination, and not the destination being the reason. Eventually, what I'm driving at is, the parameter should be the ability of that event management company, for the lack of a better word, to come and say, this is my idea to create a Araku hot air balloon festival, or a Visakha Utsav, or X or a Y. Arey, Delhi mein Diwali to 100 saalon se ho rahi hai. Magar Delhi ki Diwali, when I saw it, when I heard it, my heart was flooded with joy. That somebody has taken the cap on its head so seriously, that you marry an ancient, absolute ancient tradition with people's unexpected expectation, and create a product, an experience for a night, which is priceless. So then what you're doing is, Delhi ki Diwali becomes so big that it breaks the heart of people in joy. One parameter, creative ability to create happiness. And believe you me, this will eventually, God willing, and I hope to God that this happens. Your session, the session that I'm part of today, is the Congregations India. Congregating for whatever trigger is to create happiness. Whether it's Delhi, it's Diwali, Vizag, Visakha Utsav, Meghalayan Age, whatever. There should be a ministry of happiness. And if sarkars and departments, come into play, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu took it upon himself, and he did tell me that, Kaushik, brilliant idea. Let's take this Ministry of Happiness very honestly and take it further forward. Because then that government will, towards the citizen, create periodic executions of happiness episodes.
Fantastic. I would have
That's where
loved,
you come into play by creating that DNA.
I would have loved to carry on this conversation, Mr. Mukherji, but thank you so much. The Ministry of Happiness, I think, is a big one, is a great one. Iram, this 1 minute actually ended up becoming 2.5. But my
Sorry,
one to you.
That's all right.
What are the governments looking for these days, Iram, when you're talking of event experiences? So the top 3 or the top 4 things that you think the governments are looking for, that we event managers should be spending our time to curate, develop, etc., etc.
One of the interesting development that I'm seeing is the fact that they are looking for marquee properties, signature cultural identity, which could be events, which could and on across that cut across a lot of diverse fields. There could be a conservation angle onto it. There could be an ecotourism, responsible tourism. There could be a heritage angle interwoven to sort of generate sustainable properties. That's one thing. Second, I really feel that a lot of the governments are now are looking towards bottom-up innovation. They're now opening up to not just look at a top-down innovation, but look at events which are very participatory. So where the future of the tourism that we're looking at is very community participation. And that is also one of the very interesting solutioning which can sort of of the government change, for instance, right? Community participation, creating events that have high degree of engagement with the local communities in partnership with the communities. That's the second thing. Third thing, that a lot of what we do needs to have measurement metrics, which do not exist. There needs to be right kind of evaluation tool, which could come in terms of the private sector participation. You could look at sponsorships. the entire private sector is looking out for engaging storytelling from their perspective. So a lot of these events are basically captive markets that need to be exposed, actually first translated into the language for the private sector, and need to engage with the private sector to come in and participate. I feel the big gap that exists between the unorthodox alliances or the collaboration between different sectors is just the language change, right? The moment you start to look at event as a skilling activity, which it is, because you're training a whole lot of cohort out there, the entire positioning changes. So I think from the brand and positioning perspective, the governments are also looking out to create authenticity. I'm not, this change is nascent, it's building up, it's led by a few very forward thinking government, but it's happening. And I mean, like every event that reaches a certain tipping point, I'm guessing because of the COVID, because of the of a behavioral shift of treating the people who are coming to your state as consumers, the consumer centricity as we talked about. I think this concept is going to take place, and it is taking place. So these are the three things that I think all the event managers need to look at while crafting creative properties and events for the government.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very good input and insight, Iram. Thank you for that. Khantil, you are the last man, and the last man always, as they say. So, uh, at what pace do you see the government experiential events business build up from now on over the next 3 years? That's question number one. Answer, please. Then I'll ask the question number two.
The pace,
Answer, please. Then I'll ask the question number two.
the pace completely depends on, I think, the industry, the event industry. I think people are shying away if the moment they go and talk, they share ideas, they meet the right kind of people for a cup of coffee. Nobody will tell you no, not to come over and share an idea. I think possibilities will emerge, and the more you talk, the more you engage, and if you participate in a dialogue, the congregating part with your fraternity or with different kind of fraternity, with different set of people, like working and collaborating with architects, with different kind of people, like even with developers. We have seen an example of how a developer or even manager has taken over an airport and created a experience center there. So I think you have to look for it. Your ideas are going to your ideas are going to be very important of how fast the government is going to respond, because government has a lot of other jobs to do, and you have to be aggressive. Government will work in its own pace.
Okay. So, what are the three messages that you think you want to give them to come forward and engage with more and better business opportunities with governments? With more and better business opportunities with governments.
Small is beautiful. Start small. Don't shy away, or don't look into. Don't just jump into profits. Even the small. In fact, it's a important message for the small time event managers who are just starting off, who are not exposed. Even for the big ones who are not kind of who have a phobia towards the government, working towards government. I think they should start with any juncture and start exploring the options. So the most important thing in that process will be to really go into details of each and every element and understand the process. Once they do that one process one time, I think their fear will go. I think this entire one process of one time is something which I think we can do a session on that also, because if all the event managers are exposed towards the entire process and have been trained to follow certain simple things in talking to a government, in working with the government, I think their fear will go, and the connection will improve, and I think more properties and more such things will come out.
Super. So don't shy. The Ministry of Happiness and Ideas. So these are some four things that have actually come out of these conversations, and they are extremely important. Mr. Mukherji, you want to say something? Add something?
If you have a minute to spare. West Bengal has a tagline for tourism which says sweetest part of India. Of course, I being a Bengali, I can vouch for it. Nowhere do you get better meat. Mishti is mithai. Now, winters is when you get a good called Nolen good, which is a molasses. Sweets made out of molasses of Nolen good. Believe me, if you have it, you will faint in happiness. What stops you? If I'm an event management company or the government of West Bengal, what stops an event management company to go to the government of West Bengal and say, boss, you are the sweetest part of India. Does the world know about it? Does India know about it? Here is an event, experiential,
Absolutely.
which carries forward that message of the sweetest part of India with a set of Bengali sweets on a train. And that sweet train is coming to your city. And that city is a city which has the sweetest connectivity by an air on a train into Bengal, as a matter of fact. Believe you me. Now, event management companies got to think like that, not as an event.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So, agar wo mithai ki train aa gayi into a state like Odisha or Bombay or whatever, whichever you look at, not a state Bombay, city Bombay, and then you talk the talk of why you should come there during the winters, next 90 days, 80 days, 70 days, when the molasses are still there, I can take you farming there, you can have the mishti there, I'll take you also to this XYZ ABCD. Story में एक अलग story होती है.
तो ये कहानी अब यहीं खत्म करते हैं, Mr. Mukherji, because we've kind of run out of time and I'm getting hammers on my phone. Thank you so very much, everybody. Thank you, Khantil. Thank you, Iram. Thank you, Mr. Mukherji.
Thank you, Samit.
Thank you,
Thank
Samit.
you,
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
a
you,
wonderful
everyone.
session.
Thank you, Event FAQS. Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you, Deepak.
I hope 2021 and many years to follow are absolutely fantabulous for all of us who are happening to be a part of this business, which is the business of happiness. Thank you.